fiscal year 2016 budget at 8:35 p.m.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to open the public hearing. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. All right, at this point, the public hearing for the 2016 budget is open. Will anybody who wishes to comment or address the board may do so now.
Jim Senstock, 31698 CN1. The item that you adjusted under the Downtown Development Authority, that you added $500 for print and postage, that means you reduced the contingency $500? Is that correct? So that's $5,500 under contingency. Otherwise, you'll have to come up with more revenue up above. So, again, I'm looking at this budget, and one of the things that I'd like to see is, or I'd like to know for sure, is what are you going to transfer into the general fund as far as out of the surplus? Is it zero? I guess from the looks of it, appears to be zero. And then the same thing under the fire department. I gotta get back to the fire department here. Since there is no money to transfer in out of surplus for the fire department, the only thing that should show there is 98,000, and I believe that's what you have, I think. Police fund. Yeah, 98,086. So, of course, that's not out of that's a loan proceed. There is no prior year fund balance available anymore to deal with that. As far as, I beg to differ with you as far as the administration costs. You have 110 in the fire department, you have 110 in the water and sewer department. That's $220,000. The problem with what you said is that it's not just the expenses for those people. It's all these other expenses you mentioned. I don't know what it was, but the problem is all those other expenses are already accounted for in the budget. The people, the computers, the paperwork, the postage, all of that is included in the budget for each one of those groups. For the treasurer, for the treasurer, basically, for the person working in the finance department or accounting department. Those expenses are included in here already. So the $110,000, as I said before, is a slush fund. It's a way to get money out of the other accounts and have us as the residents pay for it and think we're balancing the budget. That's ridiculous. You're paying for it already. I think that needs to be removed from both of those accounts. It would go a long way toward helping the fire department. Geez, they'd actually be $110,000 to the good. They wouldn't have to have the $98,000. Oh wait, we don't want to do that. We want to come back a little later on, and we're going to ask the citizens for a tax increase. And we got to be able to show it and justify it, because we got to show it as a budget expenditure. It's not a budget expenditure. And the fact that it was done or has been done for years and years and years, that's fine. Years and years and years ago, this township fund and the township was in very good shape money-wise. And we had a lot lower tax rate on top of it. But you know what? Times have changed. Expenses have changed. I believe you were charging $110,000 way back then. God, that sure throws that into question, doesn't it? We were getting screwed back then, just like we're getting screwed now. And you guys sit up there and just blithely just go along and don't, oh well, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I get my money, I got a job, I got retirement, I got whatever. Screw the rest of the people. I want money so that I can play with it. It's wrong. And it's time you guys started doing something to address that. You could become heroes. You could become heroes to the residents if you were actually saving them money. But you're not. You're heels. You're terrible. And you all sit there and pat yourself on the back and oh, I'm doing a good job up here, and I'm listening to the residents, and I'm all the other stuff that I've heard out of your mouths over the past 6 months. You're not listening to the residents at all. At all. You're screwing the residents. And you're hiding it between paperwork and with numbers that are not true. Cut the $220,000 out of those other two budgets. Take the $220,000 out of the general fund budget. Geez, well then the general fund might have to have a little bit more put in from the surplus fund. Oh well, then maybe you ought to cut some other areas. This is not a shell game, and that's what you guys are running up there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim just woke me up in his statements. Thanks for your ability to calculate, Jim. Not only that, these expenditures, but I understand, Mr. Verkest, that you are personally have a surge in your mind to take over the old asbestos school down next to the pizza place on Jefferson Avenue that doesn't have an elevator in it and is full of asbestos. It needs to be remodeled. And we've just spent approximately $4.7 million on these two buildings to upgrade them to what we have today, which is very sufficient for this community. I don't know, you must be playing a different game of bingo than I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, be looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing for the fiscal year 2016 budget at 8:44.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Caprell. Discussion, board members? Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Caprell?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Rado?
Yes.
Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. I'll do my best to address some of the questions. A resident commented that we did, perhaps I may have misheard him, but $4.7 million worth of improvements to this facility. I am not aware of an expenditure that large that we made. I know that a prior board did make some improvements to the building, but I don't recall that it was anywhere near that amount. There was a discussion again about the $220,000, and the comment was made that it's already accounted for in the budget. And that's true. There's two halves of the budget. There is revenue, and there's appropriations, or I guess you could say expenditures. If we were to remove all the revenue, we'd still have all the expenditures. But what we have is we have a whole group of expenditures that hopefully at the end of the year are offset by the revenues that we generate. The only revenue that we collect, there is no millage-based revenue that this township collects, which is unique compared to just about every municipality that I'm aware of. There is not a municipality that I know of that doesn't have a general fund millage. Maybe 0.6 of a mil, might be 0.8 of a mil, but it's something. Cities are even larger. Ours is zero. We operate on whatever revenues or fees that we have. So while it's true that on the expenditure side, we have listed the expenses for the treasurer's department, there is no line item that says revenue for a treasurer. We have general revenue, and we have general expenditures. So if we were to remove that $220,000, we would in essence say that we're now $220,000 short. And when we look at the cost of, for example, collecting taxes twice a year versus collecting water bills monthly, it does change our operations. When we look at the fact that we have a fire millage and we have HR expenses, we have costs to do business, there is a cost for us as management, as a general unit, to provide those services. And that, once again, is the reason while I respectfully might disagree with a resident, as I tried to say earlier, I understand some folks have pointed out that that number is low compared to the actual expenses or compared to some of our peers, while others believe that it might be high. But it has been, as the resident pointed out, the same number for many years. So it's not something that we're proposing to increase or decrease in that budget. We're maintaining those administrative costs the same way they have been as long as I've been a member of this board. But I respectfully acknowledge and respect the fact that someone may disagree. That's the beauty of this process. I don't know if there are any other comments, or if there might be a motion to adopt the 2016 budget.
I do have one comment.
Okay.
You know, back when I first came in and Adam was the deputy supervisor, you know, the building department was grossly underfunded every year, and we fixed that. And over the past several years, you know, the building fund has been running, you know, 137 deficit, 156, and we're proposed for 141 next year. And I just wanted to point out that our auditors were pretty clear that that should be, you know, a zero-sum game. And we had fixed that, and I understand that the building fees went down and that, but that is one place to look, because Glenn does handle the building fund sort of as its own fund operating within the township, almost as an enterprise fund. Even though it's within the general fund, the building fund has some constraints around it. But that was a really big problem when we first came in here. It's about $350,000 out of whack, and we had fixed it at one point.
Any other discussion? I'd be looking for a motion to adopt the 2016 budget.
Making a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2016 budget as, with the change discussed to the DDA.
And if I may, I guess an expenditure of $500 for mailing and postage, and corresponding revision to the contingency of $500 less.
Correct.
So 550, 500. So motion by Mr. Witt, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Battanti. Discussion, board members?
Once again, my vote will reflect the loan.
Okay. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in, I'm sorry,
Roll
Mr.
call.
Witt, will you please take a roll call?
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Battanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Verkast?
Yes, thank you, board. Next on the agenda is item C. This was submitted by Mr. Tominello and the Planning Commission. Mr. Tominello.
This is an introduction of an ordinance to adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, 2009 edition, with local amendments to regulate removal of noxious weeds, regulate the removal of snow and ice from public sidewalks adjacent to property, common areas, and certain public streets, and to amend section 74-76 of the Charter Township of Harrison Code of Ordinances to prohibit the storage of refuse containers in any required front or required rear yard setback, to amend chapter 72 sign ordinance, to amend certain square footage requirements, and to amend section 34-103 to prohibit grass and weed growth past 9 inches in the township. The ordinance is attached for everyone's review. And then we'd be looking for a motion to present a first reading of the ordinance this evening.
discussion or a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to introduce an ordinance to adopt International Property Maintenance Code, 2009 edition, amend section 74-76, prohibits storage of refuse containers, amend chapter 72, sign ordinance, and to amend section 34-103, prohibit grass and weed growth past 9 inches, and to publish a notice of introduction at the Township of Harrison. And the full text may be reviewed in the clerk's office during normal business hours, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Brado. Is there discussion, board members?
I do have a question. What is the thought process, Mr. Tominello, behind the not allowing you to put your trash can in your rear yard?
So if we recall, we had a trash ordinance, a trash receptacle ordinance that was presented approximately a year ago. It was very, very restrictive. And what happened was the board asked me to go back to the planning commission, work with the planner to see if we could come up with something that's a little more casual, but still is in the spirit of the ordinance to keep the trash containers out of sight, both in front yard and rear yards. So that was the thought between the rear yard and front yard restrictions on the waste containers.
I think that, if I had to guess, the rear yard stems back from waterfront community with
That is
people
correct.
being in their
I mean, if I
backyard.
put anybody in my neighborhood who puts their trash can in their backyard, no one would ever see it.
That's correct. Well, that's not correct. Because just like Mr. Witt said, some people who live on the water or use their backyard a lot don't like looking at trash containers.
Well, if it's at the side of the yard, you can see it.
Not necessarily. Again, this was a relaxed version of the initial version that was presented to the board. So, yeah, if you have comments, we can surely take them and we will review them again at the planning commission level.
Paint and dry.
Any other board discussion?
You know, my concern with the trash can, and I understand it, but there's no, I mean, it's pretty black and white. It's gotta be in your side yard. I know of people that have it screened through landscaping in their front yard because they might not have the space on their side yard. I know in the house that I owned previously, I had a walkway to the backyard. That was it. That would have been where my trash cans were on my walkway. And I wouldn't have had any access. And then I would have had to shovel the grass because I would have had to have gotten some way to be able to open my gate to my rear yard in the middle of winter to get to my trash. Because I had a one-car garage, and it was literally a one-car garage. If you had a car in there, you weren't fitting a trash can. I just, the rigidity of it and is difficult for some people to accommodate.
Yeah, no matter how you write this ordinance, it is difficult to accommodate every possible condition.
I think the problem comes in mainly in the winter with sometimes trying to get in the side yard when you have 3 feet of snow. That's my concern, but
Again, I'm doing what the
Yeah, I
board asked me to
understand.
do, so we do have this relaxed version. If there's still issues with it, we can take it back again, or we can relinquish it altogether.
yeah, we
It's
had
up
this
to-
discussion before,
Abs-
didn't we?
absolutely.
So I feel
You know,
like
so-
deja vu.
Right, so,
Oh, boy.
I know if I put my garbage can in my backyard, my neighbor behind me would not be happy. And I think that's probably true with a lot of people, and especially if you live on the water. If you're driving on a canal on a boat, you don't wanna look at garbage cans.
See, but in my house, everybody's put abrevieties in the backyard as well, you
Right.
know, so I have like my own little private backyard. Nobody can see anybody.
Yeah. But snow falls on all 4 sides of your yard, so.
I just add, could I add one thing?
Sure.
You know, with these ordinance issues too, we're a complaint-driven community often too, so there's some reasonableness listed here. So if you have backyard that has arborvitaes and it makes sense to put your can there, it's not likely to draw a response from people that we would assume to be reasonable in putting these, enforcing these things. So it may just depend on this situation too, Karen.
No, that's what I'm saying, like Adam, in Adam's case, he couldn't even put a can at the, every house is different, right?
Yeah.
And every, unique situation. I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you, because every time you try and do something, there's gonna be 10 other people that can't do it, or they have a,
Well, why don't we do this, why don't we open
I
up for,
don't know.
why don't we open up for public comment, why
Oh,
don't we
sure,
take
go
some
ahead,
public comments, and then if we want to omit this from this list of changes, we surely can. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to that, and I knew there was gonna be discussion relative to this one item, so
Sure.
I guess
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm anxious to hear comments from the public.
I personally think garbage cans are blight, so I'd rather see them hidden as much as possible.
All right, is everybody okay with opening up the floor for public comment?
Yes.
Okay, good, we'll do that now.
Bill Surville resident. I in particular don't have a problem with that because I have an offset. My garage sticks out further than my house. I hide them behind the garage. It's technically in the side yard, but you can't see it from the street. But I do have a question. I don't know if this ordinance is the right place for it, but back when Sandra Mutter was still our ordinance officer, I asked her about, there's a few places where people have a dozen or more cars parked all over the place. And she told me there's no ordinance that prohibits them. We have an ordinance that said you can have only so many dogs and cats, but nothing about how many cars you can have. I don't know what the right number would be, but 12 is certainly too many cars for a single-family home. I think most people would agree. Why wasn't that included in this property maintenance? In the scheme of things, quite frankly, the trash containers are quite a bit smaller than one car, let alone 12. Or a 35-foot trailer, or a boat that's been sitting on Town Hall down the street here for 15 years with a raggedy piece of polypropylene tarp that's all tattered because it hasn't been taken off in 10 years. All of these things are what some people call blight. And all of those things should be addressed to some degree. I mean, I don't know that we want to be the Gestapo here, but to be the trash police and just concentrate on that one item and let everything else go, I think is kind of silly. Would you care to comment about the cars? I'd like to know, is that the proper place? Would it be in that ordinance that you're amending right now? If you were to address it?
Yeah, we'll certainly have an
Okay.
opportunity for the board
Okay.
to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like his comment.
Sorry.
Linda Karczewski, resident. I love his comment because just do what our neighbor does. When the neighbors complained about all the cars in there, he built a 8-foot fence right to the end of, almost the end of his house, so that when the ordinance officer drives by, he can't see, he or she cannot see into the backyard, so you can't. So now he just keeps throwing more and more junk in there, and your employees can't see what's going on in his yard. And we were told, unless the neighbor on each side of him takes pictures from their window or their backyard, because they have to look into it, nothing could be done. So that's all they have to do is build a fence around it, and nobody says anything, and that's what happens. Unless the containers are out all the way to the street and they're there all week, I don't see any problem with it, because mine is on the side of my house. That's where they're gonna stay, and if you're gonna write me out a ticket, you might as well send them there every day, because that's where it's easier for us to get. They're all lined up very neatly. We keep our yard and our backyard and our front yard and everything else cleaned, and especially in the wintertime, when we have to pull them to the street through the snow and everything, for us to put it in the rear yard behind the garage, that means, as you were saying, you have to shovel all the way, go all the way to the garage, and then the people behind have to look at the garbage containers, which I only have that much because there's a fence there, so they barely fit in there. So, and they can't go on the side of the garage because my garage is not connected to my house. And again, the people have a fence next to us, so there isn't that much room. And you've been in my yard and you know how much room I have on the side of my garage. So right where mine's at, that's a perfect place for them. And I hope I don't get a ticket.
You don't have to move it, it's on the side of your house.
Thank you.
Excuse me. It says here refuse may be stored outside of the building or structure while refuge is being accumulated for pickup. Okay. It shall be kept in a container and shall not be stored in the required rear yard setback. The required rear yard setback is the distance from the property line 30 feet back towards the house. So you can according to this, you would be able to put something in your backyard if your house is not right on the 30-foot setback. So I think sometimes it pays to read the actual ordinance. And in this particular case, I think this is reasonable. You can put it in your backyard if you don't get into the 30-foot setback. You can't put it in the front yard anywhere between the front of the house and the street. Actually, there's a front yard setback that goes from the property line back 30 feet. That's not what this says. It says you can't put it in the front yard, period, which I agree with. I think what everybody should understand, and I just saw an article in the paper, probably 2 weeks ago, the city of Detroit is enforcing this very same type of ordinance. They went around, they're issuing blight tickets to people and so on. Why would we want to let people put their garbage cans in front of their house when the city of Detroit is actually enforcing and stopping it? So I think this is a good stab at this ordinance. I think you ought to put it in, and then if there's problems, people can come and complain, as we always do to you guys, and we can address it, or they can address it to the planning commission. But this is a fair ordinance. It's not a problem for anybody, and I think that it'd be nice if you guys actually approved it tonight. Thank you. Or introduced it tonight, sorry.
Thank you.
That snow and ice removal on the sidewalks, I would like to thank Larry and especially Linda, because she's the initiator of that, and she's long complained about the ice and snow in front of the businesses, especially where she walks home, and I agree, that's needed to happen. I'm glad to see that. Thank you.
Thank you.
William Bardell, 18-year resident, I got some handouts for you.
You know, Mr. Bardell, you can just hand them here and we'll pass them out.
All these ordinances are no-brainers and are long overdue, and I want to thank you, Larry Tominello, for working on this. And I want to thank you, Mr. Brado, for not liking dumpsters in people's front yards. Putting your garbage dumpster away is a life skill. It's not that difficult. People have been doing it for hundreds of years. We don't have alleys anymore. You put your dumpster away, nobody wants to look at a dumpster. It's blight. It's a life skill. Your parents have been taking garbage out and putting it away. You can tuck it away so no one sees it. Nobody wants to look at it. Most old people, 90 years old, go out in their house coat and their fuzzy slippers and their walker, and they put a slow bag out there at 5 o'clock in the morning. I see them. It's not that hard. They don't even use those big dumpsters. They wash them out and put baby clothes and hockey equipment in and tuck them in the corner of the garage. No one uses those big monsters. You'd have to eat a lot of processed food to fill one of those things up. So let's follow along. Clinton Township. Outside placement during the week should not be any premise which lies between a building line and nearest public or private street. It's not rocket science. Clinton Town, Fraser. Outside storage or refuge in any front yards is defined and the zoning ordinance is prohibited. Sterling Heights, outside storage or refuge in any front yard is prohibited. Warren, You can't have it, in no case shall such receptacles be stored in the front or side yard. Okay? In Detroit, you can't, if they see the can, you're done. You get a $100 fine. This is a very reasonable, relaxed ordinance. Again, it's not that difficult to do your chores. 15 minutes a day and your house is immaculate. That's all it takes. You gotta cut your lawn, you gotta put your dumpsters away, you take your shovel, when you're done shoveling your snow, you gotta shovel your snow. This is not real complicated, and I wanna thank you again, Mr. Tominelli, and I wanna thank you again, Mr. Brado, for thinking about our township. This is not that hard. We've been doing this for years. Let's put our best foot forward, let's protect our resale value, and put something back. What we sow, we reap. We put out blight, we get blight. We want people, you want people to move in our area, you got school, you got our Lance Crew school, nobody's moving here with middle-class people. The husband might be a millwright, the wife's a RN. You think he's gonna move here with 8 kids when he's gotta look at dumpsters? That's why our schools are hollowed out. Nobody's gonna move here with families when they look at dumpsters, people not shoveling their snow, people not cutting their lawn. You're not gonna get home ownership. Let's put our best foot forward and pass this thing, finally. It's very reasonable, it's not that hard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Smith, Riverdale Street. Someone made the comment that the water side is their front yard and the street side is their backyard. If that's the case, I would not want to see a garbage can on the street side of a house, which in the water district is their backyard. So we need to amend this, so if someone wants to keep a garbage can in their front yard, which on the water would be by the water or by the canal, I think that's fine with me. But to see it driving down the street, I know one of these guys up here, I drive down their street, they live in the water district. I see their trash cans, I see 2 of them out 24/7, 7 days a week. I think his initials are LT. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Are there any board comments?
I have a comment.
Okay.
After reading this Detroit crackdown on garbage cans, you know, this is, in my opinion, I guess I'm gonna be the minority, like I always am. This is outrageous. Somebody ordinance officer down the street, looks in someone's side yard and sees a garbage can and they give them a $100 fine. That's outrageous. That's way over government reach there. That's nuts. If my ordinance officer is running around just giving people $100 tickets, that's crazy over a garbage can. I mean, especially in Detroit. You know, some people just have a little Cracker Jack house. Where are they supposed to put their can out of sight? You know, and my concern about ours, and the only concern I have, is in the winter. You know, people have sometimes a hard time shoveling or plowing their snow in the front of their house, let alone now you gotta go around to the side with 3 feet of snow. That's my only concern, you know, in the winter when the snow starts piling up with the trash cans. I don't think it's a problem in the summer, but there are, you know, times where the snow just gets too much trying to go to the side of the house.
Mr.
That's just my
Supervisor,
opinion.
I think there's a general consensus that our residents don't like to see trash cans kept in the front of the house. I mean, it seems fairly obvious, and I think that the way this is written, there's enough latitude in the rear of the house to accommodate it, so.
And I would point out, the ordinance reads, refuse may be stored outside of the building or structure while refuse is being accumulated for pickup. The refuse shall be kept in containers and shall not be stored in the required rear yard setback, and this is important, or the principal front yard, the area between the front of the housing unit and the street to which the house is addressed. So although there have been times that folks throughout the interpretation of ordinances have mixed the definition of a front yard and a rear yard in waterfront property, This specifically defines the principal front yard as the area between the front of the housing unit and the street to which the house is addressed. So I do believe the ordinance as written does differentiate so that it would not discriminate, if you will, on waterfront properties.
But I think that the resident might have misheard something, just the reason why I said that our previous ordinance only addressed rear yard, because there was probably a concern at the time about putting them up against the seawall or something like that. It wasn't that there's a front yard or backyard difference, there is no difference in a waterfront.
Yep. And I don't know if there was a question asked by the first.
There was a question about the number of vehicles. So just to make it clear, the number of vehicles, trailers, motorhomes, as long as they're licensed, as long as they have current licensing, current registration, we do not, you know.
And they're on a hard surface.
And they're on hard, exactly, thank you, Mr. Burkess. There is no limit. You can't tell people how many cars to have, but they all have to be licensed. So it's,
And there are coverage, there are other means by which we define how much hard surface you can have on a property before you need a variance for that, right?
and that's part of the building permits and building envelope, that is correct.
Correct, right.
It
So
is restricted to.
it's a percent,
Yeah, 40%.
depending on the zone.
Of the building envelope, yes.
Yep. So, so
Stone, it could be stone,
Right.
it could, yes.
Sure, okay. So we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, support by Mr. Brado. Is there further discussion?
No,
No?
not for me.
All right, we've got a motion to introduce an ordinance to adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, 2009 edition, amend section 74-76, prohibit storage of refuse containers, amend chapter 72, sign ordinance, and amend section 34-103, prohibit grass and weed growth past 9 inches, and to publish a notice of introduction at the Charter Township of Harrison. And the full text may be reviewed in the clerk's office during normal business hours, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Tominelli?
Yes,
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. York?
no,
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda, item D1. Board members, the Planning Commission terms of Mr. Dean Olgiati, Mr. James Garvin, and Mrs. Carol Murray are all scheduled to expire December 20th, 2015. They each have been valuable members on the Planning Commission, and the township has benefited from their insight, knowledge, and expertise. It is my recommendation to reappoint Mr. Olgiati, Mr. Garvin, and Mrs. Murray to the Planning Commission with terms to expire December 20th, 2018.
Make a motion to reappoint Mr. Dean Olgiati, Mr. James Garvin, and Ms. Carol Murray to the Planning Commission. Terms to expire December 20th, 2018.
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Capral. Discussion, board members?
Different Garvin than it was on the Board of Trustees, correct?
James
Yes,
as
yes,
opposed
yes.
Just
to
want to make
Robert.
sure that everyone's clear with that.
He is no longer a resident.
Right.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes, thank you. Next on our agenda is item E1 from the clerk's office regarding the approval to hire a finance director. Mr. Witt?
Yes, Board. As we have previously discussed, Mr. Spencer, our finance director, is retiring at year's end. We posted an ad online with the Michigan Municipal League, as well as the Michigan Government Finance Officers Association. We received approximately 6 applications for the position. Of those 6, we scheduled interviews with 3 individuals. One of the individuals that we scheduled an interview with withdrew herself from the process, felt she wouldn't be able to devote her time to the job, and so she very honestly withdrew, and I appreciate that. We conducted interviews with the 2 individuals. Based on those interviews, a majority of the individuals are recommending to the board that we hire Mr. Dennis Clark. Mr. Clark currently serves as the Assistant Controller for the City of Warren. He's been there for roughly 18 years. He is eminently qualified. He's a CPA, works in a lot of different similar functions as we do here, has a great understanding of municipal government. When we were speaking with Mr. Clark, he had expressed that because he'd be retiring from the city of Warren, he would have health care provided from them, so he wouldn't need health care from us. And he had expressed a salary desire somewhere in the $98,000 to $100,000 range. Once you take into account what we pay Mr. Spencer and then the cost of a family in healthcare, it roughly equals that same amount. When we were speaking with the other individual we interviewed, he'd be an individual that would be taking the healthcare, and he had expressed a salary interest of, by year's end, $80,000. So really, once you take into account the two costs between the two, it's pretty similar as far as a cost to the township. So we'd be looking at a 3-year contract with the finance director, similar in terms other than the health care to what we currently give Mr. Spencer, with 98 for a starting salary.
Do you wanna add something to that, Ken?
Do I wanna add something to it? No, I think he covered it. I'm not aware of something, is there something you wanted me to add? I guess I don't understand your question, Mr. York.
That's fine.
Discussion, board members?
Yes, I understand that this individual is asking not to be covered by our health care. I guess I just didn't think that we were going to be paying, I'll be frank, that we'd be paying $98,000. Realize that Glenn has been understanding, and we but still it just seems like, even given what we pay our other department heads on a base salary, it's just,
Right, and
it's an observation, that's all.
Well,
I
this
guess
is
I
a
was little-
contracted position as opposed to all of the department heads are union positions that come with a whole separate set of benefits.
it's essentially an at-will position, so what you see across the industry is there's a premium on that because it could be terminated. And also with this skill set, there was an article in the news or Free Press recently. There's 2 Oakland County communities that are paying the same finance director, similar size to us, 2 communities, and they're each paying the guy in excess of $100,000 because they can't find qualified municipal finance directors.
So this is a contract position, and the contract would be for this flat salary only, with no option for medical coverage or any other benefit. Is that correct?
When in the township, when we provide an opt-out for healthcare, people still receive the dental and optical benefit.
The cost is nominal. Anyone who opts out of the healthcare still continues to receive the dental and optical coverage.
Is that opt-out, isn't that something that one makes a decision on every year?
Not in terms of a contracted employee. That's the whole point. What we're talking about is there are certainly union positions and there are contracts with those unions that acknowledge the ability to opt in and opt out annually. This is a different matter completely. This is a contract, a one-on-one contract with a specific individual. So regardless of who we might hire in this position, it's an individually negotiated contract, not unlike, for example, the chief's contract.
Right.
It's a contract that we negotiate the terms on.
And there is no legacy cost with this individual. There's no retiree health care. There's no pension. There's no, once the contract expires or is terminated, there's no further obligations unless we
What
terminate
relationship do I
without cause for whatever reason. There's a 3-month severance.
And how long is this posting been up?
We posted it right after the board meeting, which was probably October, the first meeting in October. And there are, if we feel that we went to the pool and didn't get enough people, we can, I could put the posting up again, and we could do that, but I don't think we'd get anything different. If you wanted to do something different, you'd have to hire, you know, whether it's Michigan Municipal League or another executive search firm, but the cost of that is, and looking at what Michigan Municipal League, and they're one of the more affordable options, they're about $20,000. I've seen some other ones where they charge 25% of the first year salary, and then it's a tail for the remaining years of the contract. So I mean,
Well-
that is an option available to us, but I think before us, we're not gonna find much more of a qualified candidate than a person who was the controller of the city, of the third largest city in the state of Michigan.
Right, and I think maybe there's a little bit of point of clarification there. The opportunity to find additional candidates would be to say that we don't want a CPA. That would be one option, that we would modify that. So for example, amongst the pool, Mr. Witt pointed out that we had 6 applicants. Of that, we had some folks who might be, maybe their resume reads as one of the clerical staff here, that's interested in moving up. They're not a CPA, they haven't been in that position, they haven't been in a managerial role and led other employees. That would be one option. We could lower the requirements that we have. A second option, we've listed a salary range of 70 to 80, plus benefits. So the one individual came in and said, well, you know, I can start at a salary, and I recognize the opportunity to prove myself, but I'd expect to be at 80. So that's the only CPA that applied within that range. Now, if we said the salary range were, say, 75 to 90, we might get a greater pool. But once we get to that point and we include healthcare benefits potentially, which is typically offered, now we're exceeding the amount that we were paying for Mr. Spencer or the amount that we would pay for either of the candidates that we interviewed. So there's a point we get to where we have to say that if we want a CPA, we're gonna pay a fee for that. And I dare say if we want someone with 40 years of municipal experience, you're likely going to pay for that as well.
And I know because we didn't get we only got 6 applicants, I think the pay is part of that, because we reached to a couple people and said like, hey, you know, you might be interested in this job, and they go, well, what does it pay? And they go, ha! I mean, that was essentially because a CPA is a higher level of qualification.
Yeah, we actually went back to our auditing firm and some of the people that participated in our audits, which may no longer be with the auditing firm, but that we had a working relationship with. You know, this is kind of a standalone sort of a position. It's an important position. It's a key position. So I mean, between Adam and I reached out to folks, but what we found was that salary range, we know this much for certain. Mr. Spencer, we were very fortunate to be able to have Mr. Spencer as our finance director with his qualifications for the time that we did. And I recognize that some of that was through a time period when multiple employees and unions took pay concessions and changes in their coverage.
Right.
So voluntarily, Mr. Spencer voluntarily gave up, for example, a 2% increase that was scheduled to be in his contract on an annual basis, recognizing the conditions that everybody in the township was in. But had we not done that, or had he not agreed to that, which was in a contract and we had the legal obligation to fulfill, if he didn't voluntarily agree to it, his salary would be, you know, several $1,000s greater than it is now. So
That was a point I was gonna make, was that his salary is probably not accurate.
there's no doubt. We know
he
that from
foregone
the interview
raises.
process, and we know that based on his own contract.
Well, he foregone raises, so it's.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks,
thanks.
Mayor. I'm Glenn.
Right.
So I'd like to address the healthcare issue right from the get-go. You know, I act consistent, I've always said that. That healthcare piece, many people in the community that we have hired here right now, many employees, you know, they don't take the healthcare. And we have assigned a value to that of $3,600. Now, if we want to, and the board has always said that, and I've always made the point that I haven't ever had the health care here, and I've saved the community whatever, whatever that dollar amount is per year, $15,000, $20,000, whatever that is. You know, if you're gonna give that to him, I think you should give it to everybody. I mean, if that's what we're doing now.
The difference between the two,
Adam,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
just the difference between the two is he's foregoing forever the opportunity for health care. I think if we had unions that were willing to forever refuse health care for the entire term of employment, I'd be open to giving more.
Well, the gentleman isn't a young gentleman either. I mean, if you're retiring and you're getting health care for the rest of your life, of course you're gonna not forego health care. I mean, come on.
I understand, but
I mean, you're already there where you're getting health care from another community, so it's no loss to you to say that.
Well,
Do you know what I mean? Come on.
and the point could be said this way. Right now, we have, in essence, a budgeted amount to fill the chair of a CPA as the finance director within the township. We know that our salary range of 70 to 80,000 is not practical. There are certainly more than one or two qualified candidates out there for this position. So we can slice that number of wages and health care however we'd like, but in the end, when we're done, we're likely to come up with a figure that's in this range. It would be in this range for the other candidate, and if we wanted to have a greater pool of candidates and we advertised a greater salary range, we would likely potentially see a similar cost. What we're proposing at this point is to fill this position with a candidate which we believe to be, I guess, I'd like to think equal to Glenn's talents, similar with experience, at roughly the same amount that we have budgeted currently for that department.
Okay, so that being said, once again, the board has always said that we're not gonna throw this insurance component in as compensation, the total amount of the cost when we're doing your salary. You know, we put a value on that at $3,600. But when going to the candidates, when Ken says we, Adam, Ken, and I interviewed the people, and Ken and Adam wanted one guy, and I thought it over, and I actually talked to Glenn, and I wanted to go with the other guy. Now, we're talking about two people, and one's 98 to 100,000. We have never, ever, 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 ever paid a finance director anywhere near that. Period. In the history of this community. Period. 98 to $100,000. And if we're going to pay somebody 98 to $100,000, we should repost the position, because I'm sure that we're going to get some value add with somebody that has HR experience and you know, maybe an attorney that will give us some value add on the back end, where we're not paying for you know, so much HR for attorney bills or whatever.
Do you offer health care with that posting?
Well, you certainly can post that if you don't need health care, you know, you can add it or not, but it's sort of changing the game at the end. Now, as far as the person that we're talking about, and I'm not gonna say the name because it doesn't matter at this point. This is their resume. City of Warren, 1997 to present. Assisted in controlling accounting operations of the third largest city in Michigan, overseeing 401A operations, Downtown Development Authority, financial operations, and many other special projects. That's the one, and then there's some CPA firms and some other private things. Now, the other applicant, okay, and this is where I was torn, and that's why I asked Glenn. And this gentleman, the first gentleman, does not know BS&A. Just for the record. So, you know, here we are, we sometimes want BS&A, sometimes don't. It's, you know, there's no, once again, criteria in what we're doing. The other gentleman that applied, and I believe you all have his resume, was the finance director in Clawson from 1991 to 2000. He was a city administrator and a city treasurer in the city of Grosse Pointe and city controller from, he was city controller from 2000 to 2007 in Grosse Pointe, and he was the city controller and treasurer from July 2007 to March 2011 in Grosse Pointe. And in a city, you're allowed to do both of those jobs. In a township, the treasurer is not allowed to act as the clerk. It's a separation of duties thing. Then in East Point, city controller for 2 years. City of St. Clair Shores, he was there from September 2014 to January 2015. Then he was hired at an accounting firm, and currently he's working at the County of Wayne. Now, when Glenn looked at all of this and looked at his duties, and just a couple things Glenn pointed out, you know, he did online banking, CNP Express. I don't know what that is. Glenn knows what that is. Wire transfers, AP disbursements, semi-monthly payment, CAFR, Act 51 reporting, federal government account to submit transitional reinsurance fees.
Darren, I have a question. Does he know, does this candidate know BS?
Absolutely. Proficient. He knows the COBRA filing, the ACA disclosures, the SCMSD and SDMA audit. So when Glenn looked at this, Glenn was quite impressed that everything that Glenn does, this gentleman already has experience in, including all of the federal and state reporting that Glenn does that, quite honestly, I don't believe any of us know all of that reporting. But that's what those, all of these, you know, CNP and reports and things like that. So that is why, in particular, I like this gentleman, because when Glenn told me that this gentleman, based on his resume, can walk into the job, and it's as if Glenn isn't even there. There's zero learning curve there, essentially, with this gentleman, because he's done it all. That's why I went with this guy. And furthermore, he wants $75,000 to start, and if we like him, he'd like to go to 80 at the end of the year. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. You know, do a year and then 80 years. And this gentleman, you know, we want to talk about the health care. You know, this gentleman would be a single payer on the health care. And he is a CPA and an MPA. He has a master's degree in public administration as well, which the first guy does not have. So while I understand all the argument, if you look at these two gentlemen, the second applicant clearly has more experience than the first applicant. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Glenn's job right now is very intensive. He does a lot of the grunt work. My guess would be that the gentleman from Warren, because I don't want to mention his name, because it's not personal, the gentleman that works at Warren, my guess would be that he's been around so high up that he doesn't do the grunt work. I would think that Warren, having 120,000 residents, probably has a staff of a few people that do all the grunt work, reconciliations and this and that, and he doesn't do that stuff. I would bet if we asked him that question, I thought about it after, actually today, quite honestly,
Did you,
that he doesn't do that grunt work and he has a staff.
did you call him back and ask him that?
I did not call him.
Okay, so I think there's some important points there. We did ask that question. We certainly indicated to both candidates that you're looking at an office of one with two clerical staff that work with you. Both indicated that they were comfortable with that work condition. The thing that concerns me the most about the second candidate is in the 3-year span, he's worked for 4 different employers. And by his own admission during the interview process, you made it a point to say that he oversight all cash flow, C&P Express, deposits, credit cards, wire transfers, AP disbursements, pay monitoring, tax rolls, CAFR, Act 51, pay.gov accounts. And by his own admission, he said after 4 months on the job, they came to him and said, "You're not working out, you're not catching on fast enough."
That is not what he said, Ken.
That is exactly
No,
what
that
he
is
said.
not what he said. He said that they came to him and said that we don't believe that you're a fit, and he didn't know why he was let go.
His exact
That is
words.
exactly what he said, Ken, so don't try and squeeze the other guy in with the lies. That is a lie, Ken.
It is not a lie.
That is a lie,
He
and you
said
know
they
it.
told him two things.
Oh.
They said, number one, they said that
Oh.
he's not learning fast enough.
That is not what they said.
That's exactly what he told us by his own
That
words.
is not what he said at all. That is not what he said, Mr. Verkest, and you know it.
Well, in either
He
case,
said,
we
he
may
said-
disagree on
he-
that,
he
Mr.
said
York.
specifically, when we asked the question, he said that he didn't know why they let him go, but he suspected it was because St. Clair Shores was using a different accounting system that he was unfamiliar with, and they didn't give him any training to properly learn that system. That was his quote.
Okay, let me ask you this. On his application, he's listed references. Did you call any of those references?
I did.
So let me ask you this. The first reference that he listed encouraging us to call, did you
Mr.
call his
Verkest, I'll
first
just
reference?
answer the question. The first reference that I called, the gentleman worked at Chase Bank, and per bank policy, he's not allowed to discuss any applicants that we might have per the Chase Bank policy, and that's been their policy for forever.
Why would he be listed as a reference? Why would the applicant list someone as a reference who isn't allowed by law, according to you, to comment?
No, I
as a
didn't say
professional
law.
rep- well,
What I said, Mr. Verkest, and I get you're a know-it-all, but what I said, and listen to my words again, is the bank policy is that gentleman is not allowed to comment on people he knows while he's working at the bank. That was his comment. Now, if you want to talk about, the law, you certainly can write to that person, and the bank will respond to you in writing. But he is not going to talk to anybody verbally
okay, well,
for fear of a lawsuit.
gotcha. My concern is this. With his work history and 4 jobs in a 3-year period, substantial gaps in employment, this doesn't seem like the kind of employee that-
Substantial gaps? Where's a substantial gap, please?
Well,
What would you consider a substantial gap, Mr. Verkest?
I would say 15 months is a pretty substantial gap in employment.
And
16 months?
And I'm not gonna violate the HIPAA laws because I was on the front page 3 times of the Journal. I think the gentleman told us why he was off, and he had an illness, and we'll just leave it at that.
That's true. I'm reading this document. This document says to me that in a 3-year period, he'd worked for 4 different employers, and this document shows me that he has gaps between all of that employment. Gaps don't indicate that you took an advance from one place to the next because you saw a chance for promotion. Gaps indicate that you were terminated or let go from one position, and it took you some time to find another position. I don't know those things.
What gaps? Once again, please, what gaps?
From March of 2011 to July of 2012, he shows no employment. From January of 15 to March of 15, he shows
Wait,
no
where
employment.
was it? I'm sorry? So the last,
on
so
page 2.
the last 3 years during the Great Recession, right? Right, where everybody was unemployed, right? Is that what we're talking about? Well, let's talk about the time period prior to that. The guy's worked since 1986, and other than the gap where, I'll just say that he had an illness, he's worked every day of that. Every day, he's worked.
Well,
So while I understand that you want to skew it,
no, I don't wish to skew it.
you do wish to skew it.
It's
That's exactly
it's
what you're
sufficient
doing.
to say that you and I have a difference of opinion on these
Absolutely.
candidates, and I don't know that we need to debate this,
Well, I think we do. This is an important position
no doubt about
within
that.
this community.
Yep, I
okay?
agree with that.
And I think we need to do this right, and I don't think we need to be jumping the gun. But I don't think anybody here, I certainly as a trustee, looking at this gentleman's resume that you brought, gives any indication that this guy's qualified for the job. I other than he works for Warren,
I have a question.
Mhm.
This is certainly one of the most key positions in the township. Would it be unreasonable for these two candidates to interview with the entire board?
I agree. That
No
was what I
problem.
was
Has
gonna
that
bring,
ever been
yes.
done before?
We have done it in the
Yes.
past. It's a public
Yep.
meeting that we would hold. We'd schedule times, and
I
bring
mean,
the
could it
individuals.
be done in, like, as a private, I mean, not
The
private,
alternative
but,
would be,
closed session?
No,
Sure.
item?
it's not eligible
No.
for a closed session.
It's
but the
not.
alternative to that would be that a subcommittee of, say, 3 trustees could participate in that interview process, for example.
I just
And-
wonder
And
if
that
it's-
wouldn't make it a public meeting if there was a desire. In other words, in essence, what we have is we have 3 of us who've interviewed the 2 candidates,
Right.
and, you know.
I was
mean,
gonna
this is-
suggest
this
that,
is
cause
a-
I think this is an important,
It's a key position, it's a high-paying position. They
What's that?
work
The interviews. You're
pretty
essentially saying-
independently,
You're-
but at the same time, they have to be
Who cares?
accountable to the state. I think it's a really important position. And I don't know that I feel comfortable voting on either of these plus there's a big difference in pay. So,
Correct.
I don't know if I feel comfortable voting on this without meeting these 2 candidates.
So let me ask the question, Mr. Huth, is that, would the fact that as a typical policy, the 3 full-timers come back with a recommendation after an interview process, would that then, if we had a subcommittee of trustees, would that somehow be, perceived as a violation of Open Meetings Act? In other words, would that,
We'd essentially be creating a majority of the board that had conducted these interviews without,
right?
I would feel uncomfortable, I think.
It's,
I know, I think it would, I think
You know, when
it's
we
murky.
hired
well,
Glenn.
why don't we look for the opinion,
go
I
ahead.
guess?
it could be argued that way, and, I hate to say too much in case someone argues it that way and says, you ask the lawyer, but there'd probably be a better way to handle it than having 3. A lot of times you have the whole board meet and you ask the people as a courtesy not to come in and watch the other guy interview because it is a posted open meeting. That's probably the safest way to handle it.
Yes, the other candidates.
Yeah,
Now, when we hired Glenn and VJ, we did a whole board process. That was very open, the whole board interviewed. Remember that, Glenn? We actually had a 3 person subcommittee. I believe Tony was on it, and John Gaber, and I believe Rob Garvin. And they whittled the people down to 3 or 4 individuals, and then the board met, and we interviewed the people, and
Yep.
they made a decision.
And just following
Oh,
up
yeah, Mike,
from,
you were too, yep.
from the, I'm not, obviously not opposed to the idea of doing the interviews. I think that it is an important position, so if you're not comfortable, that's fine. But if at its face you're uncomfortable with the compensation and it'd be stupid to ask them to come in and then be like, well, we're not gonna pay you that anyway, you know what I mean?
It's not
So-
just compensation. I think it's just, I'm looking at both resumes like everyone else, and there's just too many things. Just too many things. I think that I would feel more comfortable voting on one of these candidates if I actually met these 2 people.
There's not a clear cut in this one. A lot of times we bring in clear cut. Obviously, I disagree.
Yeah, no, I think it's, this is not a clerical, this is not a, this is a key position. It's gonna have a lot of responsibility, so, that's just how I feel. Not that I don't trust anybody that's already done any of this research, I would feel more comfortable,
This is an important position,
Yes.
period.
So, I agree with Mr. Brano. I'm uncomfortable right now, and frankly, I agree. I understand there can be disagreement. I get that. It's a very important position. I think the degree of disagreement that we have here concerns me. I'll be frank, I'm a little concerned about the money, but I can, I'll think through that. But I agree with Mr. Brado. I'd like that,
Yes, you
At
meet both
least-
candidates
at
and
least.
make your own decision.
It's always the best.
I mean, that's what we did with Glenn. Glenn and VJ and
I'm not opposed.
And it just.
but Glenn doesn't play dodgeball very well. At the company,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, we knew that at the
township
time.
picnic, not a good dodgeball player, so.
And just as a follow-up to the board, we do not have another scheduled meeting this year. We'd be looking into January. Mr. Spencer is done at the end of the year. there is no carryover, so I would be looking to have this as a special meeting prior to the end of the year, if all
You have it
possible.
later this week?
Well, I would think that, yeah, that's what we're saying.
I just wanna make sure that we're all on the same
Yeah.
page, as we're sitting here, we can,
Up to the two candidates as well.
yeah,
Yeah, if they're available.
right, but I just don't wanna, I wanna make sure we're all on the
If
same
they're
perception.
interested in the job, they will.
Well, I don't,
nominate.
yeah, I doubt either candidate would, refuse to participate.
No, they're all familiar with municipal, they know.
But I would take your statement a step further and say that, given the opportunity to interview these candidates, I don't know that it would do us any good to say, okay, well, in other words, that isn't a workshop, that would be a special meeting for the purpose of making a decision
Yes.
at the end of that. I think that's important, because we
Yes.
wanna act this.
That would be, I wouldn't have an issue with that. Cause you're right, we would have to make a decision and vote on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, you know, when we did hire Glenn, you know, I think we went out 2 or 3 months without having a finance director. I mean,
It happens.
it's not, it's not critical that we hire if.
We didn't go
it-
without, we hired an outside firm to fill in.
Okay, well, given that normally people have longevity in that, it's important, and if, you know, if neither of these candidates are good, then we can still go out, whatever.
And the only other thing I would add is that the total compensation package is important based on the contract. So if one guy is getting $80,000 and he's getting insurance, then that equates to $92,000, that's $92,000, period. Not the $3,600 or whatever we're talking about insurance. If the other guy says no insurance and I want $95,000, $98,000, that's what his number is.
We're talking about a budgeted amount to fill the
Budgeted
position.
amount of money for that position.
And I think that, certainly that was the approach that we took, regardless of the candidate. We're looking at a total cost to fill the position.
That's
Because when we said, well, should we look at if someone take an option to buy out at $3,600, okay, well, are they willing to come in, say, at $80,000? So if you said, well, we had candidates who said, I'd take $80,000 and I'll take $3,600 to opt out of healthcare, that's a significant difference in a number, and it starts to become attractive, but the reality is, we really had two candidates that met this, and neither was excited with the salary range, but, so, I feel confident that we have, a good candidate here, and I believe the board, would be able to come to that conclusion. And I do believe because of that, it's worthwhile for us to try to do something yet, still this week, perhaps, if possible. Specific to that, is there a desire to try to choose a date that works for this board, at this time?
I think Friday's out for everybody, it's Christmas, people need to do.
Wednesday
do-
is off the table.
Well, it depends on the time of the day, of
Yeah.
course, right?
True.
I think people
Um,
work, right?
I think if you're gonna have everybody involved, it's
Yeah,
gonna be after,
I mean,
it's gonna be
Some
after
of the
6 o'clock.
trustees work during the day,
Yeah, and
I certainly wouldn't ask.
And I
some
guess
of
from
them-
my perspective, I wouldn't say that Friday's out. I think both of these
Right, I
people
would
are
say the
working
same.
individuals. If they said, hey, I can be here at 5:30, you sit down, you talk to two of them,
I can make Friday.
yeah,
They can make any day.
I can
Yeah.
make it during the day. I'm one of those trustees that has
That's
time
right.
on his hands,
right,
apparently.
Cover us up.
that's right,
Friday's fine for me.
You do.
fair enough. All right,
Cause we can't now.
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, we can't.
So the question was asked from the audience, and again, I've been trying to be liberal and allow people to shout out, but we do open up the floor for public comment, but the response is that if we said, well, everybody gets to interview both guys one at a time, or, for lack of a better word, 3 of us have already interviewed both candidates. As soon as we say, well, let's let Larry do it, now there's really 4 of us that have done it, and we do that under the guise of a non-public meeting, even though a majority of this board has done the same action. The potential exists that there's an appearance that we did this a little at a time so that we avoided a public meeting. So I think in the end, it's best to ask both of these individuals to come in, address the board. We can try to keep it as informal as possible, give them a chance to interview, and then the board can make a decision.
Could I ask one thing, Glenn? Could you possibly come to the meeting so you can ask some questions about what you do?
Bad idea.
Because we don't necessarily, I mean, I work closely and Adam does, but, you know, I can tell you, I don't know all that you do, and I know you do a lot of specialized reporting to the state and federal, government, that none of us really know all those reports. You're a workhorse and you sort of do them.
Possibly, it depends on the timing. I did provide Adam with several page list of items that I said the person should specifically know. And I don't know if you guys got to that list or not. That would be
No.
as good as me being there as far as that goes.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, as an alternative, I'd prefer having you there, but I recognize that's a demand on your schedule. So as an alternative, I think if we had that list, we could, you know, speak with some relative authority.
When you get to a certain level of a position, notwithstanding things like you must know the computer system and say reporting to the state of Michigan as opposed to reporting to the state of Ohio, it really comes down to chemistry. You get two equal people and one guy's just gonna hit it off with everybody in your organization, and one guy's gonna hack everybody off walking in the door. So I haven't heard you talk about that part of it, although Mr. Brado was kind of coming around to that issue, that regardless of who you pick, there's gotta be a certain feeling in there as well as a knowledge base. And I would think at the level that you're trying to hire somebody, the knowledge base should be assumed. And I guess if they don't have it, they will be gone in 3 months.
Right.
In our contract, do we have, I should have asked this before, is there some 90-day, 180-day period?
A probationary
Yeah.
period. But
There's not a probationary period set up, but they're an at-will employee, so we have the ability to terminate them
All right.
at any time.
Okay.
I'm available early on Friday
well, I
and
think,
all day Thursday, and Thursday.
yeah, I think the best at
No, I'm
this
just
point-
saying you asked, so I'm looking and I'm just saying
I,
that.
actually, I didn't ask, but I suggested that Friday might be good, but I think the next step would be, to, you know, contact both candidates, look at some dates, and the board gets an email, we'll post
Even into the first 3 days of the following week, right?
possibly, right? Or a Saturday morning. I mean, it's okay, we can do
No,
that.
I don't know about that.
Well,
Not this Saturday. Not for
As
me
far as
anyway.
Friday goes, let's just hope they're not Star Wars fans.
there you go. That's
I'm
what we're
available
looking
early. I can be here until about 7:15.
at. Oh, I think that's reasonable.
Right, that's an hour to Dearborn, 7:15.
Good. All right. I don't believe that any action is required by the board at this point. There is no motion required to do this. The board's expressed what their will is, so unless there's an objection, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Or if someone has a motion that they feel compelled to make on this item. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Item F1, approval to opt out of the provisions of PA 152 for 2016. Board members, PA 152 requires that municipalities annually opt out of the requirements of the act. Otherwise, certain mandatory employee health care provisions must be implemented. The employee health care plan negotiated in our collective bargaining agreements is the same for all employees, has a high deductible. It does not meet requirements of PA 152, therefore we must opt out of PA 152. I think it's important to understand that the high deductible plan has proven to be, in the long run, a cost-saving plan for our employees. Over the 4 years that we've had this plan, we've seen 2 years of premium increases and 2 years of actually premium decreases, to the point where in our current contract, which began couple weeks ago, we're not far from where we were 4 years ago. And primarily the reason is the cost of this plan, by its design, encourages the employees to use their health care responsibly. And because we are experience rated, meaning because a portion of our rates are set based on the actual utilization and the cost for Blue Cross to provide our health care, this plan has, in the long run, actually proven to save money. There is no way for us to institute this plan and still be in compliance with PA 152, short of requiring, as opposed to the deductible, a participation in the premium. So, this is the same action that this board has taken since 2011.
So just so the residents are aware, this came out of the legislature and the school reform bills. So the school systems have to comply with this requirement, and I believe Glenn might know, but it ramps up every year. But I think the healthcare cap is somewhere around $16,000 this year, or you have to pay 20% of the actual premium. So by opting out of this, we can do whatever we want. And just for the record, I voted the same way every year because I get my insurance through the school, so we are required to follow this.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to opt out of PA 152 for 2016.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Capper with support by Mr. Tominello to opt out of PA 152 for 2016. Is there discussion? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. I guess I'm a little uncomfortable when you opt out of something, and I know that I've been uncomfortable before, probably will be uncomfortable again. Obviously, this was done by the state government to save money for the governmental units, school districts, et cetera. So obviously, if we're opting out of it, we're not saving that money. I guess the first question I would ask is, if in fact we're not saving that money, how much are we not saving? You guys haven't told us that. Or how much are we saving? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. It was good enough for all the school people gooses. What's wrong with the ganders in Harrison Township? Once again, we're standing out on the pedestal. We're the highest in everything. We're the best in everything. We're the most expensive in everything. If you're going to put this on the agenda, tell us what we're saving or not saving. I know you don't want us to know that. But it seems to me like I'm watching you guys vote here, and I feel I don't have all the data. If I sat up there on that board, I'd have all the data. But since I have to sit out here in the audience, and I have to be one of the 26,000 people in Harrison Township that you're trying to keep in the dark, I want to know the data. How much are we saving here? You know. And if you don't know, Glenn knows. And if he doesn't know, then you can have the data available when you come in here. But don't put something like this on the agenda and say, oh, we got to do this. We must opt out of PA 152. We don't must have to do anything. We may opt out of it if it's advantageous to us. But you said we must opt out of it. Why? I mean, we've got over 50 employees. If it saved $1,000 a person, that's $50,000. If it saved $4,000 a person, that's over $100,000. We were just talking about a budget amendment of $98,000. Again, it's the pennies that count, guys. It's the little amounts that count. When you do them by a big number, it starts making a difference. 50 employees, 100 employees, and $1,000 a person, it's costing us extra for that, that's a lot of money. And you're not telling us, and you're keeping us in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. the reason why the agenda item refers that we must opt out of PA 152 is because the package of benefits that we provide to our employees comes from a product of multiple things, not the least of which is a negotiated contract. So each bargaining unit throughout the toughest times or the leanest times within the township agreed to a whole series of concessions, and a change to the health care was one of those concessions. We looked at several different plans, and in the end, it was a majority decision of the board, and I think the numbers have borne out, that a high deductible plan whereby a greater percentage or higher responsibility of the healthcare costs are borne by the employees pays dividends by actually modifying, I guess you'd say, the behavior or the choices. So if we have a plan where we say, you need to put in $100 a month towards your deductible, but that's your money to spend, or we say you need to put in $100 a month towards your premium, and if you do that, it doesn't change your health care. Once I'm paying for the premium, I have no incentive to underutilize or overutilize the health care. So if you're on the margin of making a health care decision or a health care expense, we believe, and I think other municipalities believe, because this is a relatively common plan that we have, that the way to do that is to encourage folks to make good choices through a high deductible. And again, as I pointed out earlier, our renewals on our premiums have borne that out. But there are other options. We don't have merely the option to impose, if you will, PA 152 without violating contracts that we've negotiated. Those contracts are a sum total of multiple benefits. So their wages are a component, longevity, pension, and healthcare certainly is one of those, as well as retiree benefits. So at this point, if we were to say we're not going to opt out of PA 152, come January 1, we'd be imposing costs on employees that are in violation of the contracts, which would set us up for presumably some legal challenges in that department. So I don't know that there's a clear, flat, well, this costs us this or this saves us that. I don't think that it's that simple to say. I certainly don't have those numbers. Perhaps, Mr. Spencer, you have those numbers.
Now, I do remember that when we were under the old plan, we were having 12 to 15% increases every single year. And last couple of years under the high deductible plan, it's been a reduction of premium in the 4 to 6% range. So I don't have to have a computer to figure that all out in numbers. Of course, you would want to take a plan that's going down and down and down. That's what it's designed to do. And I may be wrong, but I think even if you let 152 slide, it doesn't take effect until the end of all the contracts that you're on, so it doesn't do anything anyways.
Thank you.
I do have a question. How much do we pay for family health care right now, roughly?
1,200 and, well, I know for two person, it's $1,215. I think for a whole family, it's $1,500 and I want to say $32.
So we pay about $1,800 in premium, and then we fill the HSA, so roughly $20,000 is what the number we throw around here is, right?
15 times 12 is 18.
I don't know, we seem to throw this $20,000 around roughly.
Okay.
So let's just say $4,000 per employee or whatever, roughly, because it scales down, you know, from family to single person, times 50-some employees, so $200-some thousand, roughly. Now, PA 152, that provision was only when they started PA 152, that at the end of those contracts, it ended. There was a specific provision to that. But what's funny is, you know, you talk about negotiating the contract. When they did this, they just, you know, threw it on all the teachers' contracts, and that was that. You know, but when we did negotiate, we did talk about this, you know, that we'd have to, you know, really by doing nothing, we just opt in, really is what happens, so.
Yeah, I think the total cost though is a little bit misstated there, because as Mr. Spencer pointed to, when we went to this plan, certainly we realized significant savings over the prior plan, that's number one. So if we were to opt out and say, well, we no longer have this high deductible plan, for example, we went to some other plan, the premiums for that plan would likely increase. So when we say, well, we're only covering this much of the premium or this much of that plan, what we would experience is a greater percent of that cost would be shifted to the employees. Now, in and of itself, it's all fine to look at one portion, but to say that unilaterally, I'm just gonna shift cost to the employees and they'll just accept it and that's all that there is to it, at some point, when you negotiate a contract, you're looking at a total of benefits. And you're looking at a competitive package to be able to recruit good people. So I don't know that we can simplify it as by saying, well, if we just took this action, this cost would be shifted to the employees. There would certainly be some ripple effects to that action, and I don't know that would be a responsible action to take.
Well,
But
that wasn't the comment. I was just saying that if you didn't do this action and you had the hard cap or whatever, that it would save you $200,000. I wasn't making a comment on anything else other than that,
gotcha.
right? And they use this was the reason they did this and allowed the states or the cities and townships to